What was it really like to live in ancient Rome? Not the gladiators, not the emperors, not even the senators, but you, the average Roman citizen. You might think you know, but you don't. Forget the myths, forget the Hollywood versions. Today we step into the sandals of an ordinary Roman citizen and discover a world stranger, harsher, and yet surprisingly familiar to us. The day begins before the first rays of sunlight touch the rooftops of Rome. The city is still cloaked in darkness, but already the distant sounds of merchants setting up their stalls and the clatter of carts on cobblestones echo through the narrow streets. Life in ancient Rome starts early, and so must you. Your home? It's a cramped, noisy apartment perched above a bustling marketplace, known as an insula. The air is thick with the mingled scents of bread baking, animals, and the ever-present dust. Space is precious, and every inch is shared with neighbors, family, and sometimes even strangers. If you're fortunate, your room has a tiny window, letting in a sliver of morning light and a breath of fresh air. But most insulae are dark, with little ventilation, and the only light comes from oil lamps or the cracks beneath the door. Privacy is rare, and comfort even rarer. These towering insulae are built quickly and cheaply, and danger is never far away. At any moment, the building could collapse, or a stray spark could ignite a devastating fire. The smell of smoke is a constant reminder of the risks you face just by living here. As you wake, rubbing the sleep from your eyes, you're surrounded by people. Some you know, many you don't. In ancient Rome, sharing your living space with strangers is the norm. Privacy is a luxury reserved for the wealthy, and for most, every morning begins in the company of others, ready to face another day in the heart of the empire. Breakfast. What do you eat? Fancy feasts. Think again. Most Romans started with pulse, a thin, gritty porridge of grains and water, sometimes bread if the miller was generous, wine, diluted, luxury, not daily routine. Notice the simplicity. The average Roman didn't dine like Caesar, but they survived. Barely. Step outside, and the streets roar with life. Merchants shouting, children weaving between carts, slaves scurrying, and the ever-present danger of crime. Pickpockets everywhere, fires, common, disease, unseen, but deadly. Rome was magnificent, but surviving it took cunning, luck, and sometimes sheer force of will. Now, work. Most citizens weren't soldiers or senators. They were craftsmen, bakers, street vendors, or laborers. Sweat, noise, dust, sometimes heat so intense it could crack stone. The workday started at dawn and ended at sunset, and money? Scarce. Taxes were constant, the cost of grain unpredictable. Survival was more than routine, it was strategy. But not all moments in ancient Rome were defined by hard labor or endless struggle. Life in the empire was a tapestry woven with both hardship and joy, and sometimes the most unexpected realities emerged in the spaces between work and duty. There were times when Romans simply paused to enjoy the company of friends, to laugh, to share stories, and to find comfort in the simple pleasures of daily life. Romans truly cherished their social rituals. Banquets, feasts, and gatherings were more than just opportunities to eat and drink. They were essential moments to build relationships, strengthen alliances, and celebrate the bonds that held their communities together. These events were filled with music, conversation, and the clinking of cups, creating memories that lasted long after the food was gone. The public baths, for example, weren't just about keeping clean. They were vibrant centers of Roman life, where people gathered to network, exchange gossip, and even discuss politics. In these steamy halls, deals were struck, friendships were forged, and secrets were whispered. Taverns, too, played a vital role in the social fabric of Rome. Think of the Roman tavern as the ancient world's version of social media, except there were no phones, just plenty of wine, heated debates, and, on occasion, a little chaos or even violence. These lively spaces were where news traveled fast, reputations were made or broken, and the pulse of the city could truly be felt. Yet, here's the twist. Roman social life wasn't always glamorous or luxurious. For most, it was a matter of survival, not just entertainment. Everyday gatherings in modest homes or crowded courtyards were about forging connections that could mean the difference between hardship and security. To survive in Rome, you needed more than just hard work. You needed allies, favors, and a good reputation. Every handshake, every whispered promise, every exchanged coin was a step toward building a network that could support you in times of need. Because in the end, Rome didn't care about you as an individual. It cared about what you could offer, your skills, your loyalty, your connections. In this world, survival depended not just on strength, but on the relationships you built and the value you brought to the community. Family, the center of Roman life, and, a source of constant pressure. Sons were expected to contribute, daughters to marry strategically. Education existed, but mostly for those who could afford it. The majority? Well, literacy was rare. Knowledge was earned through labor, observation, and survival. Love, affection, loyalty. Yeah, they existed, but duty often came first. Survival first, everything else second. Dinner in ancient Rome is a humble affair, far from the lavish banquets we often imagine. For most families, the evening meal is simple and nourishing, built around what's available and affordable. Lentils simmer slowly in clay pots, filling the air with a warm, earthy aroma. Vegetables, whatever is in season, are chopped and added to the stew, sometimes with a handful of barley or a crust of coarse bread to stretch the meal further. Occasionally, there's a treat. A sliver of salted fish, perhaps, brought home from the market. Meat is a rarity, reserved for special occasions or the wealthier households. For the average Roman, it's a luxury, not a staple. Rome is a city bursting with life and commerce, but its abundance is unevenly shared. The elite dine on delicacies, but ordinary citizens, plebeians, laborers, and shopkeepers make do with what little they can afford. They learn to savor every bite, knowing that tomorrow's meal might be even more modest. After dinner, families gather together, sharing stories and laughter in the flickering firelight. These small moments of connection are precious, a comfort against the uncertainty of daily life. Sometimes, neighbors drop by, and the conversation drifts late into the night. If they can spare a few coins, perhaps there's a visit to the local theater for a play or some music. But more often, the evening ends quietly, with families preparing their bedding on the floor, ready for another early morning. Because in Rome, each new day brings its own challenges: exhaustion from hard labor, the burden of taxes, and the unpredictability of fate. Yet, through it all, the people find resilience in routine, and hope in the promise of another sunrise. Night falls, but safety doesn't. Streets are dangerous, crime doesn't sleep, fires rage, rats roam, disease waits silently, and still, life continues. A Roman citizen doesn't dwell on fear, they adapt, endure, survive. The city sleeps, but its heartbeat never stops. So, what was a day in the life of an average Roman? Not the glory, not the legend, but resilience, hunger, danger, heat, noise, and yet, laughter, love, camaraderie, a world of extremes, yet not so different from ours. Perhaps we romanticize Rome because, deep down, we recognize the struggle, the ingenuity, the human will to survive. The next time you think of Rome, don't imagine togas and gladiators. Imagine you, navigating crowded streets, dodging danger and finding small victories every day. And if you think survival was the hardest part, wait until you see how the elite truly lived. If you want to see the secrets the emperors didn't want you to know, hit subscribe, because Rome was a city of stories, and not all of them are in the history books.